Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. There are puzzles here if anyone would like one. And there's also civic action pamphlets and a signage. Thank you. No, no, you're fine. Oh, they're just counting the number of times. So there's no, don't worry, we won't do anything with your information. No, don't worry. Perfect. Okay, I think in the interest of respecting everyone's time, we're going to get started. Thank you to those of you who are joining us in person. Thank you to those of you who are joining us remotely. My name is Emily Hayhurst. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the graduate assistant for Pitt Votes in the Office of Pitt Serves. I would like to start by thanking, is the feedback bad for just me or is it everyone? Is it okay? Okay. I would like to start by thanking the Office of Pitt Serves and the Office of Engagement and Community Affairs for hosting Civic Action Week. I would like to thank our panelists for joining us today. And before we begin, I would like to read our land acknowledgement statement, which I'm borrowing from the Office of Sustainability. We recognize that the University of Pittsburgh occupies the ancestral land of the Adena culture, Hopewell culture, and the Monongahela peoples, who were later joined by refugees of other tribes, including the Delaware, Shawnee, and Haudenosaunee, driven here from their homelands by colonizers. We honor these traditional native inhabitants of this place and uplift their historic, unique, and enduring relationship with this land, which is their ancestral territory. We pay respects to their elders and their past, present, and future people, community, and culture. While we cannot change the past, we commit to continued gratitude for the gifts of nature, along with ongoing respect, care, and stewardship of the land, each other, and future generations. Right. So we're going to start with a little bit of a game. So the University of Pittsburgh participates in an initiative called NSOLVE, which stands for the National Study of Learning, Voting, and Engagement. It's based in Tufts University, and what they do is they cross-reference participating campuses with local, state, and national election data. So they're able to provide very accurate estimates of voter data, for example, like what percentage of students are registered, et cetera. So we are gonna play a Kahoot game of our own University of Pittsburgh data. Unfortunately, the 2020 data has not come through yet. They have to wait until all the state election data is uploaded. So this is going to be based mostly on our 2016 data. So our game pin, do you guys want to play? Our game pin is 119. Can you see it? No, 119. Oh, perfect. Awesome. Sorry, no cheesy Kahoot music today. All right, I'll give 30 more seconds if anyone here or remotely would like to log into the Kahoot game, and then we'll get started. Yay, so many players. All right, everyone here good? No, you'll go for it. All right, are we ready to go? Did it load? Awesome. Okay. All right, so our first question, what percent of eligible Pitt students were registered to vote in the 2016 general election? All right, so the answer is 87%. For the record, I'm not the Emily that's playing. Our next question, what was Pitt's actual voting rate? So what percentage of those voters actually voted? The answer is 66%. All right, got Josie in the lead. So knowing that Pitt's was 66%, what do you think the average voting rate for all public higher education institutions was in 2016? The answer is 53. So Pitt's was a good 13% over the average, which is great. Ooh, an upset in the standings. Okay, getting a little contentious here. Did the undergraduate or graduate student population have the higher voting rate? Ooh, it was the undergraduates. Another upset. So breaking down that undergraduate class here, which had the highest voting rate? And junior and senior did get combined in the data report into upper level. It was the upper level. Typically at our institution and others, first years tend to have the lowest voting rate, as a fun fact. All right, so the fields of study were defined by NSOLV, but of these options, which had the highest voting rate? Correct, it was area, ethnic, cultural, gender, and group studies. Right, and the reverse, which had the lowest voting rate? It was computer and information sciences. All right. So now we're switching into midterms. So our voting rate in 2016 was 66. Knowing that, what would we guess the midterm voting rate was? It was 42.5. Midterm rates tend to be significantly lower. All right, so knowing that Pitt's was about 42%, what do we think the average voting rate for all public higher education institutions in 2018? was 41. So although we had a higher voting rate by far in the 2016 general, we were not that much higher in the midterms. So that is the end of our questions. We'll show the winners in a second, but just so you can see the overview, this is our 2016 report. So I used the public institution for the trivia because those are the most similar, but the voting rate for all institutions was 52. We were 13.4 higher than that. And we definitely had a little jump from our 2012 election. Once the 2020 data is out, we will publish it. So we'll be able to see what our numbers were compared to these two. And this is our 2018 summary. So as you can see, the overall voting rates are significantly lower, ours included. But our 2014 was only 14. So it was still a significant jump from 14 to 42. Hopefully this year or next year's 2022 midterms, we can similarly jump up again. And here are our winners. In third place is Nate. Is Nate here or virtual? Nate, awesome. Chan, is Chan here or virtual? Here. And first is Lexi, here or virtual. All three are here, yay. So if you want to come see me after, I can get you a Pit Votes t-shirt as a prize. Sound good? Awesome. All right. Thanks for playing. If you are interested in reading the full reports, we do have them on our website. So if you just navigate to pitvotes.pitt.edu, the institutional commitment page, we have the full reports for both the general and midterm elections uploaded. You can see the breakdown by major, by class year, by age, etc. It's really interesting, and we'll publicize once the 2020 report is out as well. So that being said, we're now going to transition into our panel, and I'd like to start by just asking our panelists to introduce themselves today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Harmon, and I'm a senior here at the University of Pittsburgh. I'm studying political science and French, and I've been working with Pit Votes for a little over a year now. And I also work with the Campus Vote Project too. So a lot of what I'm involved with here at the university is really deeply involved with civic engagement and community engagement in general. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Hi, everyone. My name is JC Brown. I am a graduate student in the Department of Social Work. I'm pursuing my Master of Social Work with the Community Organization and Social Action concentration. I'm from Mississippi. I received my Bachelor of Social Work from the University of Mississippi. And there, the past year, I worked with an organization called Mississippi Votes. And I had a fellowship with them that focused on student civic engagement and voter education. And I also was a student worker in our Office of Community Engagement, and I led our first voting ambassadors team. And it was a group of 10 students, each from different majors, working together to engage students in the election. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Great, thank you both. So something I am in a class about is dialogue, and something that we tend to avoid in dialogue is silence. We naturally want to jump in and talk whenever there's a silence because we're not comfortable with it. So for this conversation, what we're going to have after every question is a 20-second pause. And that's an opportunity not just for our panelists to think about the question and reflect, but also everyone watching to reflect on the question and form your own ideas before you hear the panelists speak. So it's going to be a little uncomfortable, but I'm a big fan of silence, so we're doing it anyways. And I will put the questions up there. I'm a visual learner. I will forget the question if I can't see it, so they will be up there. So our first question is, if I can get the slide to go. There we go. Okay, why should students vote in national, state, and local elections? So I'll start our silence. All right, if one of our panelists would like to jump in.
I'll start. I think students, we're change makers. Like we come to universities to learn and to learn from not only our professors, but our peers. And I think that we are the future leaders of our country. And I think being active participants in our society is the way to go. Like voting is a core principle of civic engagement. Of course, there's other forms of civic engagement and advocacy, but actually showing up to the polls and not just showing up to vote, but knowing what you're voting on, being informed. Because it's more than just saying, I'm gonna go vote and just vote down the line a party, but actually going in there with information on the candidates, things that will affect you. And I would go so far to say that local elections should get more participation than national and state, because those are the things that affect our everyday lives, like how much we pay for parking on the street. So yeah, I think that we have a duty to vote. We have a duty to be active participants in our society and help shape policy for our futures.
Yeah, a lot of what I was thinking as well is really in line with that. And I think that one of the biggest reasons why we, the youth, I guess, should vote is largely because we don't right now. And you can kind of see how that is reflected in the sort of policies that are implemented. And you see, typically it's the older generations who will be the ones most likely to turn out to vote. And you can see that reflected in a lot of the policies coming out, such as climate policies. A lot of younger voters tend to have more of a consciousness and more of a general prioritization of issues that are related to the climate. And you don't see that as much emphasized in older voters. And I think largely that's because it really does affect our generation and like our livelihood in the future. That's a very possible thing that can happen. And so looking at all those different policies, we're the people who are going to be the most affected by these policies for the longest amount of time. And because of that, I think we should definitely have a say in that. And it also doesn't stop at voting either. A lot of it comes from community engagement and getting involved with your community members, supporting one another and uniting one another. But voting is also a very large component of that as well.
Great, thank you both. All right, our next question is, what about elections on campus, such as the faculty grad union vote or student government? Why should students engage and or participate in these? And why is turnout statistically low in these elections? So we'll pause. All right, if someone would like to jump in.
I can speak directly towards the faculty union right now that's happening because I have a lot of involvement with that right now. And although students, undergrads currently cannot vote in the unionization effort, this faculty union is a really monumental thing that could be happening at the university, and it's going to impact the livelihoods of faculty members, but also students in turn as well. And what's really interesting about the faculty union is that it encourages other forms of unionization to take place here at Pittsburgh. Like, I think 2 weeks ago was now the staff union announced its campaign to be emphasized, like working towards unionizing, and eventually that can lead to grad students and also undergrad students who will be unionizing and therefore fighting for a more equitable world that they live in under the University of Pittsburgh. So this election and this vote, not necessarily an election, but this vote is very important for all students to pay very crucial attention to and to show support for their faculty members, because you see that a lot of people can be very hesitant to vote yes for a union just out of general fear of people finding out and general worries about what could happen with that. But I think that by showing support and being students and standing in line with the faculty members in that struggle will be a very good thing that can also come back and help students in the long run as well. And we've had a lot of student voices, such as the Student Government Board recently came out and refused to support the faculty union vote and make a statement in support of it. And a lot of the students' reasonings for that was because students shouldn't really get involved in it, and that it wasn't really our right to have anything to say about it, but that could not be farther from the truth. The faculty union cannot thrive without the support of the students in this university as well. And I think that just needs to be a more well understood sort of thing at this school.
I don't really have much to add on that because I've only been here 2 months now. So I think Sarah stated it very well, but just a general thing is I think it's about empowerment. and being able to stand with faculty and knowing your own power and seeing that power being displayed and unionizing. I think that's an important piece.
Yeah. Would either of you be able to speak to the turnout for student government elections? I don't know if everyone has seen the statistics, but it's very low. The goals for getting student turnout in those elections are set very low. That's not just our institution, that's true of almost every institution in the US. So I wonder if either of you have an idea of why turnout might be so low there and what could be done to encourage it to be higher.
The most general idea that I would have specifically in regards to the student government board elections, the low turnout for that, I feel that as it is right now, the student government board is not a very good representative body for the students here at Pitt. And you often see a lot of really opportunistic political science students go into that, just sort of looking for things to put on their resume without actually trying to represent students and what they want and what they want to see changed here at the university. So I think that could definitely be a large reason for why many students don't turn out to vote, because they historically have not seen concrete changes in their demands being met as well. So I think if we were to hope for a change with that and fight for a change with that, it would come in the form of a group of students who genuinely want to do the job and not just put it on their resume and try to get job opportunities in future career things with that. So
yeah, and that's definitely true. I even saw that in my undergrad institution. I served on the our student government as a senator for my school, but the student government, it was very white and it was very Greek-like, which wasn't a good representation of the student body. And so it's like, why should I be voting for who's going to be my student president, or who's going to be represent me in Senate, when Greek life has all the pull and has all the numbers to elect things people over and over again who are there to pad their resume, who aren't there to really speak for me, people like international students, transfer students. It was just very white Greek life that didn't represent the community. So it kind of just makes you want to be less engaged, because the question is it going to matter? Am I actually going to be represented? So.
Yeah. All right, thank you. All right, our next question. So as we saw in the trivia game, data shows across institutions that STEM departments tend to have lower voter turnout. What do you think is causing this, and how do we encourage voting in those departments? Pause. All right, if someone would like to jump in.
Yeah, I'll say, like, in a department like social work, you have no choice but to confront those things, like those social issues, and kind of how it interacts with policy and how elected officials can influence how you serve your clients. And different majors like education and humanity, you kind of have no choice but kind of even just touch on the subject of how this all is connected. And with maybe STEM majors, it's less, approaching those social issues or being able to have that space for that. So then I feel like there's a number of factors that goes into it. And to improve that, I think faculty and people in the head of these departments, how do we get civic engagement part of this curriculum? Even if it's just like this past year, we saw how elected officials just did not listen to science regarding the pandemic. That's a direct real world issue and how it affects STEM majors. And I think things like that goes into it. Is like, do they have the space to have those, to be challenged and to say, oh, maybe I should be voting. Maybe this policy will affect me in my field. So I think that's part of the reason.
yeah, I think also I'm a political science kid, and I basically have all of the voter information like shoved down my throat, like constantly, like on a monthly basis. And you don't really see that coming into a lot of the STEM classes, and for very clear reasons. And I think that As a result of that, I'm not that we should shove it down their throat, but we should make the resources more available for them, and we should have like-minded students, or not like-minded students, but students who are civically active going into these classrooms and promoting programs like Pitt Votes and other civic engagement programs to make them aware of just election laws that are happening in the city and also on a statewide level, depending on where these students are from and where they're registered to vote, if they are at all. And so I think a lot of it just sort of comes down to, and we're going to be talking about this later, but I think the university really needs to play a much stronger institutionalized role in making sure that all of its students have access to the same resources in regards to voter education compared to what we have now, because it really doesn't seem like we are given the same resources between a STEM student and between a humanities student. And that really needs to change. And I hope that we can make some sort of steps toward that. And that's a lot of the effort that we're going to be focusing on our voter ambassador program with, is we're trying to get a lot of STEM students to be voter ambassadors and go into their classrooms and engage with their peers and their fellow students and have talks with them about whether or not they're registered to vote, about if they're up to date on what's going on and like what's up for election each cycle. And yeah, that's kind of our goal with this upcoming school year. And we really would like to focus a lot on that. So if anybody is interested in being a sort of voter ambassador with those STEM students, by all means, reach out.
Yes,
Can I
excellent
say
plug.
that really quickly? Just things like that, that's a part of that intentional interactions, and not just, I'm gonna give these STEM students a voter education manual, they're good to go. But actually getting them involved in the process, getting them the training they need to go, a student ambassador to go into these spaces and saying, this is how this can affect us as future leaders in the STEM world. So I think you can give people resources all day, but are you actually helping them how to use those resources and how to apply it to their specific context? So I really like the voting ambassador idea of recruiting STEM students.
Yes, thank you both. I will use that as an opportunity to plug what Sarah just said. If you would like to be a voting ambassador, we will provide election law training, so you will be very well informed. We're really pushing to influence your own circle. So it's a low commitment. We're just, talk to your classes, talk to your organizations, talk to your peers. It's a, what's the word? A butterfly effect outwards. So if you would like to participate in that, on our Pitt Votes website and student engagement, there's a link there to apply, and we will get back to you shortly. All right. So again, very nice segue. What do you believe is the institutional role of a university or college when it comes to student voting? So we'll pause.
I think the role that the university should play is much bigger than the one it currently plays. I know right now we are really making an effort to try to get election days. We're trying to get students excused absences just so that they can go to the polls and vote. Because, for example, this time last year, I had 2 exams on election day. And if I hadn't voted by mail, I would have been completely screwed. And it seems like there is really like a lack of empathy from the university when it comes to addressing that, because year after year, unless an individual professor makes the choice to give students like a lesser course load on the day of election day, students really don't have the opportunity to go out and vote on Tuesdays. And so I think that's one thing that could definitely change with them, and should change, and hopefully it does for the next election. But another one I would say, I think university, we also have like an increased push towards mail-in ballots. And I think that the university should play a role in helping us cover the cost for students of shipping out their ballots and applying for and filling out their voter registration in general too. I think there should be a lot of cost from that covered. And I think that we should have institutionalized and concrete sets of information, which luckily we are providing. So I'm really glad we're doing this. But I think that this goes for all universities too, because election laws can vary so much between counties and between states. It's really important to have give students a concrete list of, here's what you need to do to register to vote. Here are the specific deadlines that you need to have this in by. And here's how you need to fill out your ballot, and just give them like a sort of concrete list of things that they absolutely need to know, so that there's a lot less confusion going on with that.
Yeah, I think Sarah summed it up pretty well. I know Pittsburgh is, and Pennsylvania in general, is way ahead of where I'm from in Mississippi. So like online voter registration, Pitt has polling places on campus. We didn't have that back home. So I think there are active strides being made, but there can also always be more. And really just making it an institutionalized thing, not just the on election is coming up, let's really push for voter registration, but actually an ongoing long-term commitment to increasing students' participation in civic action and training. It's all about training and empowerment and making sure that it's intentional training. So I just think always being intentional and knowing that this isn't a short-term thing, and knowing that it's long-term and making it a part of the culture of universities. It should just be like a normal thing, like going to a football game on Saturday.
Absolutely. All right. Speaking of which, the Pennsylvania registration deadline is October 18th, which is coming up. All right. And our last question before I open it up to participant questions is, what barriers still exist that make it difficult for students to vote? And how do different identities and levels of privilege play into those barriers? We'll definitely take a good pause on this one. This is an important question. All right, I will open it up to you both.
And it's kind of been touched on before, but the election day as a holiday, that was something that we really pushed, but still working on. So I think that's one of the things, making election day a holiday. But also, I really want to speak to the second part of this question, the identities and levels of privilege. Sometimes it can be more of a, this is what you need, this is what we're going to give you, but are you actually going to those spaces like Black student or the other multicultural groups and saying, what do you need from us in these situations? Because we may think that everyone starts out on the same level of knowing, oh yeah, you have to register to vote, you have to have a voter ID. What about those low income communities who don't even have a voter ID, which I think going into these communities, asking them what they need, and letting them lead the conversation and not us. I think that's something important to remember, and that can be done with Pitt Votes and the Ambassador Program. You intentionally recruiting people from these multicultural organizations, or making sure that you have a wide representation of people, not just race, but socioeconomic status, because that plays a big part into the social capital and the knowledge that's already had about voting. And also the empowerment. Some people, I know in my community, I don't speak for the entire Black community, but we feel less empowered when it comes to voting. So I think that's an important piece of the second part of the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And following up on that too, I wanted to bring up the requirement of like a permanent address or a current address that you reside at. This is something that is very difficult to attain for some homeless individuals and just people who are like in between houses. It's very, very difficult for those people to have access to register to vote because of that. And that is something that I personally believe really, really needs to be changed. But also the one thing, I didn't realize that I took issue with this statement until actually earlier this week. But your question really reminds me of that. And I was sitting in class and we were discussing lack of voter engagement, lack of people turning out to vote because there was a politician who came in. And one of the students was referring to like communities who don't turn out to vote because they don't care. And I think that's really often not the case. I think a lot of the times, and this is why I think we really need to be critical about how we look at this and have looked at this in the past. A lot of communities don't vote because the voting doesn't serve them and hasn't served them for a really long time. And that's because we haven't had elected officials to come into office to actually represent people who are living in these communities and to listen to their demands and follow through on their promises to said demands. And so I think that a sort of shift needs to be done in looking at people who don't turn out to vote instead of demonizing them as like, oh, they just don't care, they don't get to complain. they absolutely get to complain. If their politicians who they are watching cycle in and out of their communities aren't doing anything for them, they have every right to complain. And so I think that what we need to do is shift the conversation away from why aren't people turning out to vote, and how can we bring trustworthy and loyal individuals into offices to actually represent the groups of people who live in these areas.
Yeah, thank you both for those insights. All right, we are going to talk a little bit about barriers to wrap up, but before that, I would like to open it up to any audience questions, if there are any, for our panelists. Yes.
Black people feel less empowered to vote, and I agree with you. I think that's for a variety of reasons, but predominantly it's in Pittsburgh, especially being a predominantly white institution in a white city. Why should BIPOC folks vote, especially on policy, hasn't really a tradition of responding to our needs at once? And how can we increase that participation? What are some examples that you actually see tangible to increase BIPOC folks' participation in elections?
What were you saying? You said Black people in the first,
Yeah, so I was thinking
okay.
it's more generally the BIPOC population, so we can focus on Black community in your response.
Oh, you're saying Black and people of color.
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't catching what you were saying, but yeah. Okay, I think, and this is from my perspective from Mississippi, a small town in Mississippi. I've only been in Pittsburgh a couple of months, so I can't really specifically speak to the context here. But I think going into communities and having those conversations, I think everything starts with a conversation. You don't come in saying, let's get you registered to vote. Let me tell you about this candidate and what he can do for you. But actually going into the community and saying what issues matter to them, because the thing that may matter to me, because all Black people, we're not the same, we don't have the same experiences, even though people think we do, but you go to these communities and you have a wide array of issues that people are facing. And then I think it's all about meeting people where they are. And that's the dialogue has been one of the best things that I have used going into those spaces, and not saying, I can get you registered to vote, I can get you informed on this person, but actually saying, what do you want to, what do you want to know? What do you want to hear? What's important to you? And then coming back and being like, okay, let's talk about how this candidate, if mental health is important to you, let's talk about how this candidate voting on funding for mental health policies. So those are some of the methods I used when I was organizing, and specifically when I was organizing with students, because I think it's all about connecting the dots. Because you can sit there and tell someone all day, healthcare is important, you should vote, but they may not care about healthcare. They may care about something else. And you say, okay, well, let's look at how these things have been impacted by elected officials, and why your vote matters, and why organizing. And I think it's all about organizing. I know Shan, it's all about organizing your peers and learning from peer to peer, and going into those spaces, not as an expert, but as someone who it's a two-way street of learning. I'm learning from you and you're learning from me. So those are, I hope I gave you some tangible things, but those are the ways that I have approached increasing the civic engagement among different groups.
Yeah, I think to touch on that, there's a specific example I want to bring up here in Pittsburgh. That we have an awful crisis with the bus shortages that are happening in communities that are outside of Pittsburgh proper, but they're happening all throughout the city, where a lot of elementary and high school students, I'll just give you guys like the basic background in case anybody isn't familiar, but the city of Pittsburgh basically acknowledged back in April that there were going to be a number of students who weren't going to have access to the bus to get to school. And it seems like they really just kind of ignored this up until the week before the first week of school. And a lot of parents, specifically working class mothers, received an email just saying, we can't take your kid to school, you need to find a way to do it, or else you will be in trouble for truancy, basically. And so we had 8,000 students who were without a school bus to come and pick them up. And a lot of school districts, I believe, postponed the school year for a bit to try to resolve the problem. And then Pittsburgh Post-Gazette released an article about 2 weeks later saying, oh, we resolved the problem. Only 200 students don't have buses now. But they just extended the walk zone to 2 miles. So you have these 5-year-old kids walking to school up to 2 miles in the dark. And a lot of these families were not okay with this. And a lot of these families also didn't have money for a car, and they also were working. And there were a lot of different circumstances that did not allow them to drive or walk their kid to school. And so we have a lot of these communities who were just sort of left out without any sort of help. And I didn't see a single politician, somebody definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't seen a politician go into the communities where this is most affected and ask them what they wanted to be done about it. And they haven't done anything about it, to my knowledge. And so I think that's just another example. You have a lot of politicians coming into the city, specifically a lot of mayoral candidates come into the city, making a lot of promises and setting themselves up to appear as if they're representatives and also like one of the community, but then whenever it comes down to their politics and sort of policies they implement, it really just betrays a lot of people that are here. And so I think what you were saying, JC, about going in and having those conversations and learning with one another about ways to fix the problem and what the problem even is in their eyes in the first place is a huge step towards getting that done. And I think that was a really devastating misstep that was done here this summer and this school year.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, let me think about that for a second. I'm trying to think, in a lot of my interactions with students, I usually approach it by just sort of seeing what they want to be done. And I do this in a lot of union organizing as well. You sort of ask them like, what specifically are they struggling with that they would like to see changed? And we like sort of go about different ways that we can attack this problem, whether it's voting, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just general community engagement that will solve the problem. I think it should definitely be a pairing of the two. And so I think a lot of it is like, before you go into that conversation, you need to ask the person who you are intending to ask, what is the problem in the first place? And I think that's a really big way to like sort of meet students where they are. And so that's sort of like the union story of like what I usually do in talking to different faculty and just different students in general about that. But I think with voting, it's a little bit simple with a lot of like the other students. It's just sort of figuring out where they are in terms of like their registration process and their what status they're at, if they have like already applied for a mail-in ballot. So that's a little bit simpler if they specifically are just asking us, and we're in like not affiliated with any political party. So it's kind of hard for us to be like, what is your major political issue that you want to talk about? We're just more so like kind of like standing on the side, just giving people like the means and measures to be able to go out and fulfill their civic duties. So it's a little bit simpler than like going in as a politician or a representative of the community.
I will just add on to that. That's okay. So Pit Votes is pretty new. It was formed in 2019. This is our second active year, which is exciting because we would love to be shaped by student input. So one, if anyone has any ideas, recommendations, please reach out to us. Two, a lot of our strategy and programming we base on the data that we looked at. So we look at what majors do we need to be trying harder to go meet students where they are, what years. So we have like a very intentional, concentrated first year effort because statistically that's the lower turnout. So we're trying really hard to be strategic about that and welcoming. As Sarah said, we will never tell anyone how to vote, both politically and method. We tell everyone their options and help them do whatever they need to do. So that's our current approach. And again, if anyone ever has feedback, we would love to hear it. Okay, thank you so much for your questions. And just to wrap up really quick, we are going to stay on the topic of barriers and talk a little bit about voter suppression. So there are tons of ways voter suppression affects people in our country. This is just 6 of them. So I think JC mentioned voter ID, proof of citizenship. That goes along with what Sarah was saying about address. voting methods. So states are all allowed to have different laws on all of these issues. So who can vote by mail? That's a big one here in Pennsylvania because the law recently changed that allows anyone to, but it is under fire in the Pennsylvania systems. The criminal justice system, it depends hugely on what state you're in, if you have any criminal record or if you are in prison, if you have voting rights. And that's like a huge issue. Redistricting, voter list purges, voter registration policies. There are tons of ways that voting rights end up under attack. And so I want to provide a list of organizations. This first one, the Voting Rights Lab, is an incredible educational tool. They track all of those bills in every state that are affecting voter suppression. So in Pennsylvania right now, there are 89 bills circulating, and they have great guides on if they are pro-voter, anti-voter, where they are in the system, what representative has proposed them, so you can contact them directly. So I highly recommend checking them out. We also have the Voting Rights Alliance, the Fair Election Center, and the Brennan Center for Justice, all really great organizations that I highly recommend looking into if you're interested in voting right advocacy. They have tons of information and ways that you can get involved and engaged. And then lastly, if you would like to get involved with Pitt Votes here on campus, of course, please reach out to us, pittvotes@pitt.edu, or our website has lists of opportunities, tons of guides. If you need to register, you can do it through our website or email us. Yeah, anything else I'm missing? All right, great. If you would join me in thanking our amazing two panelists today. And again, I would like to thank the Office of Pitt Serves, the Office of Engagement and Community Affairs for hosting Civic Action Week. And if you did not check in, please scan the QR code down here, or there's a paper one too. You are welcome to take pamphlets. There are puzzles, and our 3 winners, please come see me so I can get your t-shirt size. And then with that, that will wrap up our event. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. We're done. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, no, please. Thank you so much. Oh, yes, you can. Yes.